Hi, all of you. Good evening. Am I streaming fine for all of you? All those who are online live with us, good evening. If you can confirm if I'm streaming fine, if I'm audible and I'm visible also to all of you, can you all confirm, please? Hello, Ashwini, Sony, good evening. Good evening. Some of the others can also respond. Chirag, hi. Ayush Prajapati, oh, some of you I'm familiar with. Nadia Mary, Chirag Kumar, Nikhil Yadav. कल मेंस का डर लग रहा है निखिल. ठीक है, you stay with us for half an hour. Okay, we should be able to help you get over your fear also. Relax, exams होते रहते हैं. You have to be alert there and ठीक है, half an hour of break with us will not harm you. Hi Vidhi, Ritesh, Judy, Bellingham, Shivam, Anirban, Sanjana, Ayush, Aradhana. Okay, excellent. So thank you all for joining in with us. We have Professor Anirudh Chaudhary. He is in KITS Law College in Bhubaneswar, Odisha. And he has been very kind to join us. A small introduction about Dr. Anirudh Chaudhary. He has been an avid scholar of political science and geopolitics, and he did his specialization from United Nations Mandated University of Peace, San Jose, Costa Rica. And since then, he has been a part of many of these conversations, debates, and discussions. He's also active on the channels, television channels, where he discusses some of these IR topics, geopolitical topics. So, Professor Anirudh Chaudhary, thank you for joining us. Lovely evening. And for those not initiated, my name is Shabbir from Edukemy. And we are hosting this discussion for the benefit of the masses, in particular, the benefit of the UPSC IAS aspirants. G20 is a very, very important event that we are seeing in our lifetime. In some ways, it's a game changer. It's a watershed event for India and Indian international affairs, Indian foreign policy. G20 in some ways is setting narrative of how the diplomacy should look like for the global south, for developing countries. It has been a grand event. Of course, the government initially was criticized because of the grandeur it associated with it. But I think rightly so. It's a matter of pride that India is where it is today. And all leaders acknowledging India's very well managed, particularly the Delhi Declaration that we had. It was very astutely worded, very much based on consensus. So G20 is a very important event. For years to come, this event will be part of our discourse, our conversations. Whenever we talk about India's foreign policy and the changes, I'm sure G20 will be part of those conversations. So welcome all of you. One of the concerns that I have about G20 preparation is I've seen students know about G20 facts, where it was held, how many delegates, what were the issues. In summary, what was the Delhi Declaration all about? They know about the programs, initiatives launched. They know about the schemes that India has been talking about. So all of that they know. But the moment I ask students and aspirants to go deep into the topics and maybe discuss a specific issue in a bit more wit, we find people getting trapped. We find aspirants ultimately are not able to go beyond stating the facts about G20. So this discussion should be enlightening for all of you. I'll suggest you too should ask questions, whatever questions you have, whatever queries you have. You also must ask the questions. And as a gesture to help you support your preparation and a gesture to help you support your ongoing preparation, this is a small, you can say, support we are offering all of you. If you can all see my screen, there is a QR code. This QR code is for sharing the model answers that we have framed on G20. There are some questions around what is the implication of the Delhi Declaration? What is the watershed or the great game changer about the global biofuel alliance? Why do we see that this is momentous for the global South cooperation? What about the role of China? So some of these topics we have addressed through questions along with model answers. So if you have done these questions and prepared those answers, you will be fairly comfortable about all discussion around G20. So do scan the code, write in your details, put in a request. If you want it, it's free. It's free of cost. We have a meme also supporting that. So I'll remind once again. So we get back to our conversation with Professor Anirudh. So Anirudh, Professor Saab, thank you for joining in. Your few words for the students, if you want to start off with.
First of all, welcome to all of you. It's been indeed an honor and privilege to be interacting with all of you. I know on a Thursday evening, it would be very tough for some of you to make it, but I'm really happy that because of the initiative of Shabir sir and Edukemy, we are here on one platform discussing perhaps one topic which will dynamically change Indian foreign policy for decades to come. And through this discussion, which we'll be having with Shabir sir, you will be able to understand why am I talking about a dynamic concept. Because there are always two sides of every coin, one positive, one negative. What we'll be highlighting today are the positive aspects of how G20 has been able to actually achieve the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family, and has taken a lot of countries on a same pedestal.
Yes, thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. It'll be a great conversation. To begin with, I think it's a providence. It's coincidental to some extent, maybe. You are from Odisha. You are in Bhubaneswar, and the symbolic representation of G20 was the Konark Temple chariot wheel that symbolizes many things. So what your few words on that? What do you think? Why did India choose that particular symbol? Why should we be talking about it? The symbol of chakra, the dharma. Okay, your views on that, please.
Absolutely, sir. First of all, to all my students, I had the benefit or the privilege of hosting certain delegations of G20 in KIT University. One was known as the Y20 Forum, the U20 Forum. Another was the T20 Forum. Now, we had taken a lot of delegates on sightseeing to two popular places called Puri and Konark. Now, they were mesmerized by what they saw in Konark. The chakra, which you would have seen behind Narendra Modi and all the world leaders, is an architectural splendor. It was actually built in the 13th century AD by a king called Narasimha Deva. So beautiful is the architectural splendor that chakra has 12 spokes through which you can actually know what point of day or time it is. And it also symbolizes continuity and progress. If you look at our Odia texts and scriptures, it gives a very important message about the spokes and the chakra. It is a cycle of life which goes on. The chakra has a lot of animals, living beings, murals, and graffitis depicted there. And the best part is every object has a significance. How do you connect it to G20 is all the documents which are a part of G20, all the deliberations and discussions, when came together, came out with a comprehensive declaration. Also giving a message that tomorrow the leadership will change, personalities will die away, but the essence and spirit of humanity, brotherhood, and diplomacy should not die.
Excellent.
The cycle of life, sir, should continue. And none better than showing the chakra of Konark, which symbolizes hope, progress, prosperity, and most importantly, a message that the only permanent thing in life is change. And that change must come for good.
Change and probably progress too. We are moving on. And somewhere it symbolizes the continuity that you talked about in terms of time, in terms of efforts. Very, very proud. I'm very proud of the culture that we live in, that we have grown up in. So it's befitting that we have shown Konark Temple chariot wheel. Thank you so much for enlightening us there. Professor Anirudh, this G20 is in some ways the landmark event for the rise of the global South.
Sir.
While we know this, because on one hand, we have added Africa and the African Union into this, any specifics on why do you think it's that benchmark, that landmark, where probably from here, how the South engages with the North will change? What's your opinion on that, please?
Absolutely, sir. Sir, before I say, there's a very famous saying. All of you can watch a wonderful Hollywood movie of 1995 called Usual Suspects.
Yes, yes.
There's a beautiful dialogue which says, the greatest trick that the devil played was to convince the world that he never existed. It is like a metaphor. The greatest trick that the devil played was to convince the world that he never existed. My students will ask me, sir, what is the devil are you talking about? I'm actually talking about a devil, which is known as diplomacy. A diplomacy which is perhaps overshadowed by personal interests. When you looked at international organizations before, you would have seen right from a G7, which was formed in 1970s because of the Yom Kippur War and the oil crisis, or to any other organization, including the UN. Please forgive me for saying that this created a club, if I can call it an exclusive so-called Delhi Golf Club, where members who had perks and privileges would hold their sway. G7 was a very dominant player till 1990s. But why I'm saying it as the devil was because of the fact that somewhere the voice of the oppressed countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America was never heard. In 1997, sir, as you know, we had the Asian financial crisis. Started in Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea, paralyzed entire Southeast Asia. The world had absolutely no answers. And most of these currencies of those countries were pegged with the US dollars. So they had a hope that perhaps they could recover. It was a mirage. 1998, you had the Russian financial crisis, and the world realized the fact that closer economic integration and cooperation can actually make the world a much more stable place. Now, my students will say, sir, what are you speaking about? Don't we have the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO? Isn't it creating a better environment for trade, business? But here you need to look at the dynamics as to whether these institutions have been able to meet their agendas in the longer run. Unfortunately, the answer is sometimes no. Not always,
yes,
but sometimes no. You look at IMF, the IMF has been criticized for its concept of conditional loans. But when we talk about G20, sir, it talks about financial inclusivity. It talks about the concept of one earth, one family, and one future can only be complete with the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Here I'll tell a short story, sir. We had a lot of foreign delegates coming in and they were like, oh my God, in Western Europe, we have this concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam since the last 100 years. It's from the universities of Europe, from a Hanover or a Dublin or a Strasbourg in France. I said, I agree with you, sir, but please take out our ancient Indian scriptures. It talks about the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam since the last 5,000 years. Yes, you might have studied it. You might have built it. But these were a part of our ancient wisdom for the last 5,000 years. And this is something which we are going to incorporate. How? Because this G20 declaration, sir, if I can call it the G21 now, 19
yes,
European Union plus African Union is a complete international body where the voice of the global North and the global South can be heard, where United States of America can sit on the same platform with a country in Africa called Sao Tome and Principe. Many of my students will ask, sir, is there really a country called Sao Tome and Principe? Now, this is the deliberation, the dilemma we face. 55 countries.
In fact, while saying G21, we forget that one Africa is equivalent to 55 countries. So in effect, we actually is now probably the true G70 plus. So we do
Absolutely.
have G77, but this has changed a lot of dynamics. So a very nice conversation, Professor, where you linked that how a lot of things have been happening without realizing that the developing countries have a stake and they have been kind of ignored. And about the devil that's not known, I'll say another thing. With the poverty that we have, with the problems of hunger that we have, these are the elephants in the room that we have not acknowledged. So I think with Africa coming in, Africa 1.3, 1.4 billion population, India, South Asia, another 1.4, 1.5 billion population. So we're talking about more than 3 billion population just in South Asia and Africa. So bringing them in, so you're right there. So this is perhaps the rise of the global South. But then extend the conversation here. But didn't we have global South as a part of NAM also? We have had global South as a part of G77 also. So what makes G20 so significant of this year in particular? We didn't talk in this term when we talked about the Bali Declaration last year. So this Delhi event, why does this become a very important rise of global South?
Sir, if you would have seen the images when the president of African Union, the Comoros diplomat, he was hugged by Narendra Modi and welcomed on stage. It sent out a symbolic message. The 21st century is also the century of the African continent. For years, Africa has been ravaged. Sir, when we talk about the NAM and G77, we forget that yes, there were countries in Africa which were a part of it. But were their concerns really addressed? Here, I would like to tell a very short story to all my viewers. I'm sure all of you love Hollywood movies. And there's a beautiful Hollywood movie called Blood Diamond, which speaks about diamond mines in Sierra Leone and how it is a problem for the entire world. Now, students, please remember in mains or prelims tomorrow, you will get a question as to what is resource curse. Africa and a lot of other countries suffer from something called resource curse. Very rich in natural resources, but plagued by political instability, corruption, and dictatorships, which has stopped these countries from growing. Please Google about a country called Niger, Niger, Niger. Around some 2 weeks back, there was a military coup in Niger. It seems the former government, sir, was pro-French. Why? The French ruled over Niger. Niger is one of the largest producers of gold and uranium in the world. And lo and behold, almost all the French companies have tenders in Niger. Now, my students will ask, that is brilliant, sir. As a part of the corporate social responsibility, shouldn't the money be flowing back to Niger? Please check the statistics. Niger is one of the poorest countries in the world, while from their resources, the French become rich. The military junta, which came to power, stated that no more are we going to look at a concept called neo-imperialism. Africa is for Africans. And I believe truly in this fact. Every country has to be sovereign in the truest sense of the word. If they are still attacked by the concept of neo-imperialism or a neo-colonialism, please forgive me, sir, when I say that the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative is an extension of neo-imperialism. We cannot create a world of equals. And this is something which has been very beautifully shown by G20. Now, when I'm giving you a reference of Blood Diamond, I will tell you philosophical thought. Now, in that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio was playing the role of a South African mercenary. Students, please research about a South African infantry division called the 32nd Battalion. Very famous during the apartheid era. After the disbandment of apartheid South Africa, many of them were hired as mercenaries. Now, Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie is asked by the actress. The actress is an American. She says that you mercenaries have done terrible things to Africa. You have destroyed the resource base of Africa. You have killed thousands of people. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Don't you think God will punish you for your sins? Leonardo DiCaprio in all his swag said that, yes, when I look around, I wonder and see what we have done to each other. all the terrible things we have done to each other. But then I realized that God has left this place a long time back. But then I realized that God has left this place a long time back.
It's
Now, what does
forsaken,
this-
abandoned, ignored.
Absolutely,
Yes.
sir. So the jackals, sorry for using the word, the jackals, the wolves, have been trying to pounce upon every pound of the African dream, its resources, its culture, its heritage. That is why G20 plus one, G21 is a correct way to say to a country like Nigeria or a Comoros or a Djibouti, you are our brothers. We believe in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Please come with us, sit on a same pedestal. Let us talk like brothers on the concept of one family, one earth, one future. If your resources are to be used, if the riches are to be shared, if that prosperity leads to a growth, it shall not be for the global north, but with
By
cooperation,
yourself.
it shall be with the global south.
In fact, if I can recall in one of those analytical articles, what it said was, if you look at the if you look at the NAM movement was not so much about rise of the global south. It was more about the global south maintaining its military neutrality. It wasn't really about they growing or they developing. It was basically trying to maintain themselves equidistant from the two superpowers who are hell-bent on a nuclear war, probably. And then if you look at G77, G77 was essentially the G7 trying to control the rest, okay, but never really the rise of the South. Maybe that's what you probably implying, that with this G20, yes, please.
And
Professor.
what I was also trying to say is, you talk about NAM or G77, there was no discussion about the global south openly in any platform. So forget about it. Even the word global south was like a pariah. In 1972, when we had the Stockholm Declaration, sir, the Stockholm Declarations, first of all, gave the impetus that somehow the voice of the poorer countries have to be heard. Then we came to 1992, the Rio Declaration. It spoke about sustainable development. But after that, neither the Rio Declaration or the G77 or the G7 for that instance highlighted a fact that how would you take all these countries together with divergent views, a different foreign policy, and an interest which has to be assimilated into a common agenda. So because at the end of the day, if you look at the G7 motto, their motto was very clear. Their motto was taking the benefits of the resources of different countries while making it sure that the North was not held accountable for its misdeeds. A simple example, sir, is the example of many international instruments, including the Kyoto Protocol, including the Paris Climate Agreement. Sir, United States of America speaks about being a responsible power. But if you remember in 2016, the same Donald Trump administration wanted to move out from the Paris Climate Agreement. USA is not a party to many human rights conventions. It is not a signatory to many important international instruments. And then you talk about global inclusivity. You must remember, my students, you must all remember that along with powers comes responsibilities. The NAM and the G77 were perhaps mere shadows. There were not much discussions and deliberations which were effective. I'm not saying that the Delhi Declaration will become successful overnight, but yes, you had to take the voice of the global south. So that is why G20 is very important, because nobody was termed as a member of the G7 or G77. If you look into that expo center also, everyone shared a dais, had a common consensus, and worked towards a Delhi declaration. And so the most beautiful thing was the Sherpa track. Sir.
Yes. I said, if I may have the audacity of saying this, perhaps G20, if not as an alternative, definitely, but definitely it will change the dynamics of the UNO also. UNO was supposed to be a representative of the world, and fighting for world, or maybe striving for world peace. So maybe G20 as a formative force can influence the reforms in a UN, can decide the agenda of the UN. As of now, UN, I believe, is kind of trapped in that 5-member Security Council. They are the ones who dictate what is terrorism, what's not terrorism, what is to be discussed, not discussed. So maybe G20 will change that. Your views on that, Professor?
Sir, I believe that the P5 countries are like the Russian roulettes. So it's a show of the rich and the clergy. Now, why I tell you all this is 1945, there were 51 member countries of the UN and 5 permanent members. Now there are 193 member countries and still the numbers are same. USA, UK, Russia, France, and China enjoy a very vital power known as veto power.
Yes.
We must understand that because of the operation of veto power, many important decisions pertaining to Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which deals with maintaining international peace and security, always come to a standstill. And because of the veto power, sir, you will also agree that these countries have their own power blocks, their own dynamics, which have been overshadowing the performance of a G77, a NAM, or an ASEAN. Now, when we talk about the reforms of the UN Security Council, before that, sir, I feel the entire UN structure has to be reformed. In this regard, in 2001, for civil service aspirants, there was a report published by an Algerian diplomat called Lakhdar Brahimi. It was known as the Brahimi analysis, in which they had pointed out as to how the structural reforms have to take place, most importantly in the UN Security Council, and how certain defunct organs, including the Trusteeship Council, have to be either removed or there has to be a complete change. This report was substantiated in 2005 by another UN report called the Annan Plan, submitted by Kofi Annan. Absolutely, sir. When you look at these two reports, they have clearly stated that the UN over a period of time had become a white elephant. The UN peacekeeping missions were increasingly becoming fragile throughout the world. For further reference, I will request all of you to watch 2 movies, Hotel Rwanda and Blood Diamond, to show how peace has different interpretations in different countries and why the UN peacekeeping forces have sometimes badly failed. Be it a Rwanda, be it a Yugoslavia, be it a Sierra Leone or a Congo, the need of the hour by the UN is to have a robust peace security system in place to expand the UN Security Council. And maybe, sir, I'm hopeful in my lifetime and your lifetime also, maybe to have a reform in the veto power segment also. Until unless the veto power is not reformed, it does not become a consensus model. It becomes a hierarchy of 5 countries. Then getting key resolutions passed in the UN Security Council is a hell of a job, sir.
So maybe this G20 can set the pace, because even since the G20, a lot of, even Turkey has come on board that India should be part of the Security Council, because Turkey was one of the main opposition. But Turkey has agreed. US has been saying the right words. France, I believe, has no issues. The main challenge is China.
Sir.
UK, I believe. So maybe you're right. Maybe in our lifetime, we hope to see these things. But yes, G20 there can be a major game changer. Now, to move on, having talked about G20 and achievements and the rise of the global South, what do you think? We have a question from Sanjana. Sanjana is asking, what is the main impediment in reforming the Security Council according to you? So Sanjana, I'm just rewording what Sir had said. It requires an entire change of the UN Charter in some ways. And for any change of that scale, we need 100% consensus of the Security Council, along with a 2/3 majority of the non-permanent members of Council, and also 2/3 majority of the rest of the UN members. If I'm right, Professor Saab? That's a hungamus in terms of operations and collaboration. It's a huge thing. If any one country of the Security Council says no, it's a veto power. Nothing happens. Am I right there, Professor?
Sir, if I can also add, There's a saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely.
जिसने power चख लिया है, उसके लिए तो वो नल्ली निहारी की तरह ही है, sir. So the veto power is like a nalli nihari for all the countries. China gets a lot of privilege because of this power only. Because trust me, the moment China loses its veto power in the UN Security Council, you will find a lot of countries backing out and perhaps going to another country called Taiwan. And this is a big headache for China.
Oh, yes, yes. Fine. So, Sanjana, I hope we answered your question. Moving on, having talked about G20 and what it does for Global South, now this is a very interesting thing. What does it tell you about Indian diplomacy? Because I think last couple of years, particularly with Jaishankar ji at HEM, and our discourse, our narrative, even our choice of words, okay, has changed while India talks about the global issues, be it terrorism, be it poverty, be it issues related to conflicts. So what does G20 tell you about Indian diplomacy? Do you really think it's come of age, or we still have quite a bit of distance to go?
Sir, we are basically looking at a modern version of non-alignment. But previously what used to happen was, we always wanted the support of a particular country. Till 1991, we were good friends with Soviet Union. But perhaps Soviet Union held an upper leverage somewhere. Post 1991, with the creation of USA, now we need to understand one thing, that the concept of unipower was there only till 2010. I have this theory of my own, that in today's times, there are three world powers: the US, China, and Russia. My students will have a different interpretation of a superpower. I have a different interpretation of superpower. And so will you have, sir, a different interpretation of superpower. Now, we are trying to send a clear message to the entire world that we are equal partners with everyone. We will not play on a back foot, but we'll play on a front foot. We would be concerned with our interests of foreign policy first, and then we will make it sure that the global interests are also taken into account. Sir, I'll give you a simple example. During the Russian-Ukrainian war, there was a lot of criticism about Indian foreign policy. People wanted India to criticize Russia for it being a blatant act of aggression, to take a much stronger stand in the Security Council and General Assembly, and perhaps vote in key resolutions. But India very critically, at that time, if you look, and sir, our wordings in the Delhi Declaration were very clear. We wanted an amicable settlement of disputes under the ambit of Article 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter. Countries shall refrain from use of force or the threat of use of force while dealing with each other, and somewhere use of force should be the last resort. Now, if you look at our policy, we have been very clear that constructive dialogue, along with inclusiveness and reduction of trust deficit, is the only way through which a lot of problems will be solved. Sir, here I would like to give you an example. Before the G20 Summit, we had the BRICS Summit and the Asia Pacific Economic Forum, where we met in Papua New Guinea. Those iconic photos where the PM of Papua New Guinea touches the leg of PM Narendra Modi. Now, I will not go into that controversy, but this is to highlight a fact that the Indian foreign policy now is mature enough to understand that, be it in Africa or in Asia Pacific, everyone has a unique dynamics and we need to respect that. So nobody talks about the fact that in Asia Pacific, islands like Tonga, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Nauru, the Marshall Islands or the Solomon Islands are in the danger of global warming and climate change and might disappear into the ocean in the next 40 years. Can we stop development then? No. The answer is sustainable development is perhaps the key. We have also recognized the fact that we cannot have an aggressive foreign policy which the Chinese have, literally taking over islands like the Solomon Islands, and they have a recent conflict with Fiji. My students will check it out. China and Fiji are having problems because the Fijian government is very clear that China is following a concept of neo-imperialism. Indian foreign policy has been very mature to understand the fact that any sort of hidden agendas will backfire in the long run. If we have to be true, then the so-called Delhi Declaration, which I have now, a beautiful 34-page document, has to address certain key issues, including food security, climate change, respect for public international law, international humanitarian law, a global food security dialogue, impetus to inclusivity, giving importance to public infrastructure, financial impetus has to go hand in hand. Sir, you will also agree that Indian foreign policy has also addressed in the last few years a very core issue. Neither are we going for look East policy or a look Europe policy. We are equally concentrating on every country, but especially in the global south. We are still saying that we are not a leader of the global south. We are a member of the global south. And we see everyone in the equal parameters. And that is where, sir, my last words to your question is, our victory perhaps to convince the African Union, the Asia Pacific Economic Forum, or a Brazil or an Argentina, that they are looking at a viable friend and ally, and not someone who will try to subjugate them via neo-imperialism or neo-colonialism. We are not an extension of the Belt and Road Initiative or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC.
Yeah, I agree on this. Very powerfully said that we are not looking as leader of G20, we are looking ourselves as a partner in G20 with the global south. Beautifully said. In fact, for a long time, the narrative of India was that we want to maintain strategic ambiguity, as in without defining which side we belong to. And now I think from ambiguity, we have moved on towards strategic autonomy. And autonomy definitely is more assertive. It is more defined. It tells our independence. Ambiguity, probably mentality was an escape mentality. We don't want to be trapped. Okay, so we want to keep ourselves and keep others confused. Autonomy is no confusion. We'll do what's right for us while we also ensure that others are not probably at the wrong side. So I think G20 stuff. Yes, Professor, please tell me.
Sir, I just remembered one thing, sir. While we were talking about this, sir, we were talking about how Indian foreign policy has also become very aggressive. Aggressive as in passive aggressive. Sir, beforehand, none of us have heard about countries like Equatorial Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, or a Cabo Verde in Africa. My students will be surprised to know that in 2021, we have opened embassies in all these countries.
Yes, we have. Including Andorra also, I think we opened the embassy.
Absolutely, sir.
Yes.
And my students in Kit Law School were shocked to hear about an island called Cabo Verde. It's a beautiful island. It has an Indian restaurant also. Yoga is very popular there. And the best thing is Bollywood, yoga and music was everywhere there. I'll give you a small example, sir. We already had the soft power. We had to reach and tell countries that we are someone who is a very trusted ally. I'll give you an example. When I was living in Costa Rica or in South America, it's a beautiful place in South America. It's not Costa Rican movies or Hollywood movies which are a rage there. You will be surprised to know that the number one serials there are the K serials. Kyunki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, Kutumb Kar Ki. It comes with Spanish subtitles.
Okay.
And the soft power of India, please imagine, yoga is so popular. Rabindranath Tagore books have been translated into Spanish and into a lot of languages. And you will be surprised to know that Indian restaurants are a rage throughout the world. In fact, my friends in UN used to always ask me an iconic dialogue called Kitne Aadmi The. There's an iconic dialogue of Sholay called Kitne Aadmi The. They were my friends in Africa and South America and Latin America. Some days back when I was speaking with them, they are saying, sir, we are now proud of the fact that we are a part of this global heritage, culture and custom, wherein your foreign policy has promoted the concept of brotherhood, equality, liberty, yoga, Bollywood, and most importantly, a concept which they all love, the love for chicken tikka masala. Be it a Costa Rica or a United Kingdom or an Australia, our food, our music is a rage everywhere, sir.
Fine, that's really enlightening there. By the way, Nadia Mary asks us a bit of root here. She says, just as, interpreting her question, just as the BRI is extension of the Chinese Silk Route. Should we see India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor as an extension of the spice route? Does it look like that? Does it sound like that? What's your opinion? I never thought in those lines.
Sir, we Indians love spices, so we can call it an extension of the spice route. But jokes apart, we need to also understand the fact that any route has a special connotation if you go back to history. Now, whether the India, Europe and the Middle East corridor, will it be a spice route or a tadka route will only be seen in the long run.
Long run, yes.
We need to look at what are its actually goals. It calls about creating a viable alternative of transportation which can bypass Suez Canal and cut down the trade time between India, Europe and the Middle East. Mary, you will also have to understand the fact that there are two critical countries here which are a part of this corridor, including Saudi Arabia and Israel. Have you ever fathomed 15 years back Saudi Arabia and Israel on a same platform talking about economic cooperation and integration? But post 2020, because of an accord known as the Abraham Accords, Israel has come very close to Middle Eastern countries. In fact, many Middle Eastern countries now recognize Israel. Now, this route is very interesting because of the fact that in the next 10 years, it will have a so-called world-class infrastructure along with support infrastructure, which will not put countries into debt, but will be more of a friendship corridor. Whether it will be successful or not, we have to wait for the November G20 online summit to see how the work has started, what are the modalities, and how do the countries propose to go on this corridor in spite of all the geopolitical problems and issues which might arise. I'll give you a small example. Jordan is one of the key countries here. Along the way is another country called Yemen. Both of them are facing civil war positions now. You talk about the Jordan. Jordan has problems of post-COVID reconstruction. You speak about Lebanon in that area. Lebanon is again on the verge of bankruptcy. Sir, you are aware that in Yemen, there is a civil war backed by one side by Saudi Arabia and backed by one side on Iran. The dynamics of geopolitics change every day. So therefore, if you have to judge as to the viability of this corridor, we have to perhaps also understand that these are the geopolitical issues, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And do we have a strategy to maneuver and come out with a viable solution? Therefore, for all the civil service aspirants,
I think if,
Sir, you will also agree that the online summit of G20.
Yeah, I think a bit of connection issue. So what Sir is trying to emphasize is there is a lot of prospects in this. It's too early to speculate if it can really become the spice route, but definitely the model in which this India, Middle East, European corridor is planned is different from what BRI has been planned. Okay, so we move on from there now. While we are so happy about the achievement, while we're so happy about the way India has risen, asserted itself, but I'm sure there are some things probably we did not achieve. There's some gaps we wish they were properly taken up. So any views on that? Any couple of views that you think G20 missed an opportunity? Probably it failed to highlight that as much. Your views on this, Professor?
So forgive me for making a very controversial statement. The G20 perhaps failed to take into account one factor, and that is coming out with a common definition or consensus on terrorism.
Yes.
State-sponsored terrorism. We know, sir, every country has a hidden agenda while talking about national policies. And state-sponsored terrorism has been used as a weapon since times immemorial. Talk about a country called Iran. Iran has a dedicated unit called the Revolutionary Guards, a very powerful military unit which controls almost entire dynamics of Iranian politics. You talk about Pakistan, it has the inter-services intelligence. In fact, every country, secret services, has certain operations which are covert, but unfortunately fall within the realm of terrorism and state-sponsored terrorism. So my biggest concern is, tomorrow if we want to have a global document or an annexure which talks about terrorism and how to tackle it. How will we solve these problems until we do not have a commonly accepted definition of terrorism and a legally binding definition of state-sponsored terrorism? You will be unleashing a Pandora's box. I agree. But on general statements and generics, it is very difficult to tackle this problem. How are you going to bring all these countries on one platform? I'll give you a small example. Please forgive me if I have hurt some of you. In 2011-12, if you remember, sir, the famous US Navy SEALs operations which took down Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, Pakistan. A lot of Americans say that it was a victory of American foreign policy. But if you ask me, that was a blatant act of state-sponsored terrorism. You entered into another country's territory without information, carried out an operation, and then went out. And then you justified two wrongs to make a right. Please remember that two wrongs do not make a right. On the other hand, you had a country called Pakistan with a lot of neon-state actors who are trying to destabilize the entire region. So talking about Africa, 13 to 14 countries of Africa, including a Niger, Mali, Chad, Sudan, Burkina Faso, are facing a religious extremism and terrorism. Now, how will G20 address these issues? And most importantly, will G20 be successful in coming out with a legal document which speaks about these two critical aspects? Is anybody's guess.
I'm sorry interjecting there. In fact, this is a bit of a delicate issue. While we're trying to assert our autonomy, while the global south is trying to find its own narrative, and definitely we have taken on the West and the US for some of the hypocrisy. But at the same time, I think the G20, while trying to make a consensus-based statement, we might be letting Russia off the hook also. I mean, it's a tricky thing, like I said, because it's very symbolic that G20 ends and Kim Jong of North Korea goes to Russia, and then North Korea launches all those missiles, South Korea, and on the same time, Putin talks about India's great leadership. So it doesn't ring and doesn't sound so nice. And particularly when he just mentioned his countries, Sudan and Niger and Nigeria and the rest. The fact is, we have got mercenary groups like Wagner Group fighting the war for Russia. So I think, yes, if I want to pinpoint one big thing that we missed out, we should have, which terrorism. But then, of course, given the dynamics, the first time we are asserting ourselves. So hopefully, maybe next time, maybe Brazil will be more inclusive of the agenda there. And one more thing I think we missed out is migrations. My opinion, I don't know how you feel about it. India talking about free trade agreements, talking about labor rights, talking about employment, poverty, migration, both skilled, unskilled, rights of the students abroad, UK being so adamant about migration policies vis-a-vis FTA. So I think migration is also another area that we at least should have talked about in a bit more assertive way, given that we're talking about women there. Your views on this, Professor?
Sir, migration, if I can call as various dimensions. If I can also say that along with migration, there were 3 or 4 core issues which perhaps G20 could have focused. Sir, first was the right of refugees.
Yes.
As to how refugees would be treated. And most importantly, sir, a pressing need of the global south, the concept of climate refugees.
Yes.
A lot of these people will soon become refugees because of climate-induced displacement. Sir, please look at an island called Maldives. We know within the next 40 years, it might go under the sea. What will happen to the people there? My dear students, please look at 3 countries, Nauru, Tuvalu, and Kiribati in the South Pacific, which are actually in the real danger of sinking under the sea because of the rising global sea levels. In fact, there is a case from Kiribati where a person filed a case, sir, in the Supreme Court of New Zealand. It is a 2013-14 judgment, Tula Tau versus Supreme Court of New Zealand, Government of New Zealand, wherein he wanted to be addressed as a climate refugee. He had fled away his country because of climatic reasons. An island called Kiribati. Now, because a lot of countries have not signed and ratified the Refugee Convention, India is one of them. And climate refugees is becoming a big issue throughout the world. Sir, I'll give you a small example, like in Chad, which is a member of the African Union. Apart from civil wars and Islamic extremism, they're having a prolonged
Droughts.
they're
Yes.
having a prolonged drought. There is an internal displacement of people, skilled people trying to cross over into from Mediterranean Sea
Yeah.
into Europe. And we have seen those images, sir, where the Italians and the Greek patrol ships push them back into the sea.
Yes. Yes. That's
So
unfortunate.
it's unfortunate, sir, and that is why I feel that it is very important to understand that global security, climate change, climate-induced displacement, and a standard definition of refugees is perhaps certain areas where the G20 could have focused in New Delhi. But
In fact, these will be the new themes of G20 in the future. And now that they have brought up the issue. So for all our students, for all our viewers, just repeating something that to support all of you, we have come up with certain questions with their model answers. So if you're interested in the questions like what we discussed right now, what does coming off the global south mean? How significant is the India-Middle East economic corridor vis-a-vis BRI? What is the significance of the global biofuel alliance? What do we understand about Indian diplomacy and its coming of age? Some of these questions have been very in-depth discussed, and we are offering model answers free for all of you. We just need to scan this code, let us know your intent, and we'll mail those answers to you. Apart from this, all our viewers, there's something else we have come up with. Because Edukemy, we are offering something called as advanced course where we go deep into the preparation with answer writing, discussion in depth. So we have something called advanced course beyond the geography foundation. We're offering you a scholarship test where you can avail of these courses at a discount and other benefits. 21st September at 9 a.m. You can appear the test, and based on your ranks, based on your marks, you'll be given the privilege. So all of you are welcome. One is to scan our QR code to get model answers. And second is be part of the scholarship test to know your exam preparedness. If you go and visit our website, there is an event section on the top. Click that, you'll get a coupon code that gives you the access to some of these. And you'll be privileged to be part of your preparation through these courses. Coming back to our discussions, thank you so much, Anu sir. You talked about this problem that we missed out. A couple of last questions that we can discuss. What do you think is going to happen next? India has set a very high benchmark. In fact, some of our viewers here are talking about whether this means India becomes the Vishwa Guru. So we have Ritesh continuously asking us whether India can become a part of the global supply chain assertively, whether it means that India will become a superpower or not. So fine, those are good ambitions to have, but I think the bigger issue is what from here, what next? Now you're going to Brazil, continuously from Bali to India to Brazil, the South dominates the agenda. So what do you think next? What do you think is the agenda going to be when you take up G20 next year?
Sir, here I had a very interesting insight. When G21 moves to Brazil next year, now there will be also talk, sir, about addressing the issues of indigenous communities in every country.
Yes, I'm sure.
And about a global problem which is known as deforestation. Because global south faces a bigger challenge because of deforestation, which is interlinked to the right of the indigenous communities also. Certain countries in South America, sir, very beautifully have been promoting the concept that the earth or the mother nature is a living being, has certain legal rights which has been given to them in their constitution also. For further reference, I would request all of you students to look into the Ecuadorian constitution, which speaks about the concept called Pachamama, or the Mother Earth, where they have stated that the earth is a legal individual, enjoys certain legal rights, and if corporations and companies violate it, they are out to pay compensation. When we move to G21, the first big issue for us would be how far the annexures and documents of the Delhi Declaration been followed in letter and spirit. What are the global dynamics next year? Whether the problem of terrorism, whether the problem of indigenous communities, whether the problem of refugee definition, climate change have been addressed or not. And most importantly, sir, आज भी ग्लोबल साउथ या ग्लोबल नॉर्थ में हर इंसान का 3 बेसिक रिक्वायरमेंट है, रोटी, कपड़ा, मकान.
Yes.
जब तक ये 3 पूरे नहीं होंगे, आप किसी भी मीटिंग या एजेंडा को थियोरेटिकली सक्सेसफुल बोल सकते हो, बट प्रैक्टिकली वो डेकन लेवल कमिटी ऑन फूड सिक्योरिटी कैन ओनली बिकम अ सक्सेस जब हर दिन भारत और पूरे दुनिया में कोई बच्चा या इंसान भूखा नहीं सोएगा. सर, वो मेरा कहना है.
Absolutely, I agree. Okay. Without dealing with poverty, employment generation, without talking about food security, none of this is going to ultimately culminate into a successful venture. But I really hope that G20 sets that pace, which I'm optimistic it will. It's like, that the global South has now tasted power. The global South now knows that they can rally with each other and perhaps push some of these otherwise exploitative agenda to the corner. Professor Anirudh, what do you think about China missing the whole show? Because I think that was another miss, or maybe it was planned, it was symbolic. Xi not coming to G20 Day Declaration, I mean, the most prominent face missing. What do you think? On one hand, I want to believe that it's a missed opportunity for them, but maybe it also means that they're trying to subvert Indian efforts. So finally, what do you think? Xi missing, is it going to help India? Does it mean the world will realize the hypocrisy to some extent? What's your take on that, please?
Sir, you know that after the G20 also the big security drama which the Chinese delegation did in the Taj.
Yes, the big bags and
suspicious equipments. I think they were jammers. A lot of Western media says that. I don't believe on that. But my main point is you could have just allowed for the screening. You tagged it as a diplomatic bag, fine. You are protected under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Immunity. But the same Vienna Convention speaks that screening of bags is not an issue. You made a whole ruckus of that, tried to put the entire Indian security establishment in bad light. Another thing, sir, I personally feel is Xi Jinping has become like an elephant. He is being trampled upon down by his own weight. The promises he had made to his own people, the so-called false promises he made to the entire world, the Belt and Road Initiative or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor has been a complete failure, sir. On top of that, look at the audacity of China when it gives lectures of human rights to various countries, including India. While every day, forgive me, my dear friends and students, for saying, every day thousands of Uyghur Muslims are being targeted in the Xinjiang province of China, where the Chinese establishment sides with the military junta in trying to pull down the rights of the Rohingya refugees in Myanmar, where, sir, just 7 days after the BRICS summit where they said there will be a stand down in Ladakh, the Chinese government comes out with a so-called routine map, quote unquote routine map, where entire Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh is their territory. I'm sure that if Xi Jinping had come to Delhi, the Indian and the Western media would have had a field run, sir. And I'm sure no amount of food, water, or diplomacy would have saved Xi Jinping from those uncomfortable questions, sir. And what surprises me more is on one background, you talk about international peace and security in the Delhi Declaration. On the other hand, very conveniently, your diplomats are there in Pyongyang, North Korea, establishing a troika with Russia, China, and North Korea, the help, and having your own agenda, which don't you think, sir, perhaps undermines international peace and security? एक तरफ you
Yes,
say that Article 2, Clause 4 has to be promoted at all costs. On the other hand, you are talking about supplying weapons to Russia.
exactly. In fact, that is what I said. It's a bit tricky for India that while we are trying to put ourselves as strategic, interests, autonomy, we have to play this game a bit more delicately because we cannot give a clean sheet to Russia either. But then I think directly, indirectly, we have wrapped Russia also. I remember one of those meets where Putin was called upon, okay, and his policy by our own prime minister. But yes, this is a dangerous nexus, North Korea, China. So I think Xi's absence perhaps was China's loss. And the kind of model that BRI was based on, I hope that the world sees it, and the new economic corridor probably can have a different model altogether. Now, yes, please tell me, Professor. Yes.
Sir, the biggest hypocrisy is 2 days after the Delhi Declaration. My dear students, you can check it on internet also. Chinese ministries come out with a statement. There was one particular Chinese ministry which came out with a statement saying that India had subverted the interest of all countries that come out with the scandalous Delhi Declaration, which aims to threaten international peace and security.
Wow.
So then how did your diplomats agree to the salient provisions of the Delhi Declaration? अब इसका मतलब यही है कि आपका फॉरेन पॉलिसी एक ही चीज पे विश्वास करता है, मुंह में राम बगल में छुरी. How will the world trust you?
Yes, I think it'll come out in the open eventually. I'm sure it will. One of the questions, which I think is a very valid question, Ritesh will take your question. He says that one of the agenda of G20 was to take care of issues around financial stability. And that was one of the very core issues. In fact, that's how even G7 came in the first place. Is it possible that we're diluting from that agenda with so many issues taking up? Maybe in short, one sentence, if you may, Professor, what do you think? Are we diluting this agenda?
To an extent, yes, because of the fact that it would have been better if the documents could have highlighted on certain core issues which were the first pressing concern. And the second is when you talk about financial stability of countries, getting to know the true economic prosperity of any country, the GDP growth, is a tough task. One case here is the case of China. It is like a bubble, a balloon bubble. There are now indications, sir, you will also agree, including by Bloomberg, that the Chinese economy, the projections which it had made may not be so much. Their economy might not be growing in a particular pace.
It's a dark web of confused facts, manipulated data. We don't know what's happening. So I think Ritesh, Professor Saab agrees that we may be diluting the agenda, but then the fact is financial stability can't be achieved without the other aspects, without taking care of poverty, global security, without energy security, without talking about trade, which is truly inclusive. So I think financial stability is now the bigger objective, but it can only happen if all of this is properly taken care of. So if you want to sum up, and of course, before I sum up, once again, a reminder to all our viewers and participants, we are offering a course which is called as the advanced course. Advanced course is like the next level preparation for the UPSC once you have done your foundation course. Please visit our website, edukemy.com, the event section. There is a coupon code. You can copy that, EDU10, and apply for this course. Plus, we also have a scholarship test on 21st of September. You'll have some questions, MCQ writing answers also. Based on performance, your marks will give you some discounts, will give you certain privilege. So it's definitely something to go for. And plus, all our students, whatever we discussed today, me and Professor Anirudh, we have a framed couple of questions, the answers to which will give you free of cost. You just have to scan this QR code. send us your intent and we'll mail it to you. There are 5-6 questions along with some multiple choice questions, which I believe if you have solved those and read those, your G20 preparation is complete. The problem with G20 understanding is most of us know the facts. Most of us know those details of the names of countries, but the in-depth analysis, the way we are discussing in terms of the historical antecedents, what happened in the NAM, what happened as a part of your G7 initiative, linking that with issues of human rights and migration, the in-depth analysis chahiye, which I think most of you will lack. So the discussion will help you, plus check out the model answers on this. And of course, all of you are welcome to be part of scholarship test. So before we wind up, Professor Anirudh, one last question to you. In short, in brief, if you can highlight this. What do you think, sir? The objective with which G20 was conducted, the intentions of the G20 grouping, particularly after Bali, did we achieve those objectives or not? Did we overachieve? In short, do you think it's optimum? So what do you think, sir?
So theoretically, the Delhi Declaration is a brilliant piece of paper. Trying to get countries like Russia, China, and US on one platform, where the biggest impediment were the wordings on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that is fine, sir. But as a lawyer, I also believe that action should be weighed along, your words should also be weighed by your actions. We have a brilliant document. Theoretically, everything is good. But do we have the urge, the motive, and the consensus to take it forward is a secondary question. I know we have been speaking about a lot of issues. That is why we need to understand that the G20 cannot lose focus on certain core issues, like sir also said, poverty alleviation, sustainable development, food security, right of migrants, right of refugees, and then will come a host of issues. I know it is tough, but the countries will have to come together. And here, sir, at the last I'm reminded of the words of a famous poet called Robert Frost, who once said, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep,
Absolutely. That's very brilliantly said, Professor Anirudh. Thank you so much for joining us, all our viewers, Professor. We hoped to be part of an interesting conversation. And for me, it was very engaging. A lot of things I came to know, and the references to some of the movies, which depict a lot of geopolitics and the atrocities by some of those countries of the West. And I'm sure our viewers, our listeners also benefited from this. So thank you for joining in. I hope we answered all your questions. Keep in touch. We'll come back for more of this kind. We'll expect Professor to be part of more such discussions. Till then, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bye from Edukemy, bye from Professor Saab, and bye from me, Shabir. Thanks a lot. Good night.